All right, the camera's rolling, and I want to tell you some stories about RCA. A really good company to work for. Probably the best place I ever worked. As far as the workload, the fellow workers that you had to put up with. In my case, I got in there through unemployment. The guy at unemployment office was laughing at me. He says, "Oh, I'll get you in there." I said, "Well, I tried to get in there." He goes, "No, you're as good as in there." So anyway, he made a call and they made an appointment, and I went there, and there were two different jobs, and one was in Building 50 with DeMille. The guy's name was DeMille, and they did government contracts. And I went in that department, and I'm talking to them. I noticed all the guys are working with their heads down. Even though I'm in there, nobody's looking up to look at me. So they've been told, don't stare at this guy. So I noticed one of them gets up. He goes over to a drawer, and he opens it up. He takes a transistor out, and then he has to log in a book. And I said to the DeMille, I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, every part you use, you have to log in and log out on a book." And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to work here. This guy, and he went on and on and on with showing me the tour. But I was like, the whole time, all I was hearing him say was, want, 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 want. Okay? So now I go back, I come outside, and I get back in the trolley. Now the trolley was nothing more than a Volkswagen bus, a Volkswagen van bus thing. You get in there and he'd drive you to the next stop. He knew where you were going. He knew you were coming. Okay, so he drives me to the next place. He goes, go upstairs, blah, blah, blah. I go up there and I meet my future boss. And he wants to hire me. He takes me around. They show me the tube section. And I said, well, I can start right away, but I told him, I actually told him, I said, I've been working since I'm 15 years old in electronics. And I said, I never have a vacation. I went through companies. They would work me during the skeleton crew, and I said I'd like a couple of weeks off. And he says, "You never had a vacation?" I said, "No, I never had a vacation." She says, "All right. Well, they sent me to a doctor. I had a heart murmur. I spent a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, going back and forth between doctors. So when I did get hired in there, uh, I really didn't have a vacation. They did finally hire me. Their doctor said no. My doctor couldn't hear the heart murmur, but they made an adjustment, the union, whatever. Behind the scenes, they said, well, what's this guy going to be lifting? Will he be lifting anything heavy? So they come out with a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper, it promised I wouldn't lift anything bigger than a shoebox. Fine. Okay, so they hire me. And the funny stuff is, I fit in like right away. I was, say, 20 years old at the time. Everybody there had almost 30 years. Let's see, you figure out the math, from 1945, like the war was over, like I think at 1946, and they wanted RCA in Harrison closed down by 76. And what that would do is nobody would get their pension. That's the honest truth, okay? There were people that had less time and hit 65, they got a pension. But the mass people that worked for RCA got screwed. And they were very nice to us. And I never figured out why they were being so nice to us when they were laying us off. That's because they wanted to get it done as quick as possible without any problems with the union or everything. Well, anyway, one of the funny things, and let me stop this for a second. I got to think about this. Okay, I'm back. I go into to be hired, and as soon as I walk in, this guy has all these Robert Wood paintings in his office. And I said, "Oh, you got Robert Wood paintings?" He goes, "You know Robert Wood?" I said, "Well, I don't know him." I said, "But I got one of his paintings in my living room. My father bought it at Two Guys." And he says, "Well, that's where I got mine." And the kid's name, it might have been Robert Wood, but his last name was Wood. And so he put these paintings up. He was a nice guy. He says, "I'm going to hire you. And we have a bit of a problem because the mill over 50 wants you." And the guy that they interviewed from Pennsylvania for the life test didn't want the job. So I said, "No, let him have it. Let him have 50. And I said, "Honestly, I don't like the mill." I said, everybody over there looks like little weasels. They're like shit scared. And he starts laughing. He goes, "It's bad over there. Okay, everybody knows Building 50 is bad." So anyway, I just started laughing. So anyway, I got the job. I told you I met with this boss, and I came back. I said, well, I took the job. I'm back. I said, and I told him the story. I really didn't have a vacation. I had to go to all these doctors, and I finally get the job. And I told you, I fit right in. And here's some of the things I had to do. The boss would come over and he goes, John, you got to put the Christmas tree up. I'm like, what? He goes, every year they break out in fights putting the Christmas tree up. Can you just, here's the ornaments, the union or somebody, they bought this Christmas tree. I don't remember if it was real or not. But in other words, here's the bulbs, here's the lights, you put it up. So I'm putting it up, and I'm really doing a good job because I'm watching the women watch me. And on my floor in Life Test, we had the women that I didn't know about originally. After they went through menopause, they would have like women that went through menopause and would have some type of disorder, mental disorder. They would put them on our floor because they would fight with other people. So at any time a fight could break out. Now my first day, I broke up a fight, and I was told never to do that again. And one of the girls that worked in there saw my last name, and she was a friend of my dad's from Pennsylvania. I got talking to her. She warned me, don't stop fights. The union guy said, don't stop fights. You know, I know you're here, it's your first day. But I'm putting this Christmas tree up, and all this stuff's going through. I'm only there like the fourth, fifth day, whatever. And I'm putting the Christmas tree up, and I'm making sure I'm doing a really good job. And they're coming over. Some people going, that really looks good. Last year, so-and-so just drew it up real quick. I knew not to do that. So I put the Christmas tree up, and then so many weeks later, I had to take it back down, put it all away, and the whole thing. I don't remember if it was real. I think it might have been real. But anyway, that's one of the first things they gave me to do. That you're like, I just got here. Well, we have too many problems with people that have been here for years. Like I said, they're coming up on 30 years. What was the math? On 1946 to 1976. Was it 30? Was it 35? Well, anyway, so I start getting these things like I told you about the last video about the company store. So this guy Mike, one of the bosses, comes in and he says, Nikki wants a tape recorder for his son for Christmas. So I go down with Nick, and we're picking it out. And he's not buying a real tape recorder. He's buying a real RCA tape recorder, but there's a stack of them that don't work. And the whole idea is he buys the tape recorder. And it was a two-channel stereo tape recorder. And it was nice. It had all kinds of sliding knobs, but it didn't work. So he says to me, I'm buying this, and I know you can fix it. So he buys it for like $8. Things like normally $45 or more back in those days. We bring it upstairs. I open it up, and there's no power. And I go through the power supply section, and it's just a matter of diodes that have cracked loose from the circuit board. You call it a cold solder joint. I call it they cracked loose from stress, from shipping and vibration. So I sucked the solder off those joints, and I actually added wire around the diodes, and I'm building it up with bus wire, and then I soldered, and I said, this will never go bad again. And it came right on, and we did like a little routine for his son for Christmas on the tape recorder. So I get this done, and the boss said, fix it on company time. That boss was friends with the other boss. It was done deal. It come over, we're doing the thing, the boss was involved on it, and then Nick puts it away in the box. I go sit down. Now the other guy, I always tell you about him, he's the one that had to say everything 3 times. He was a bit, let's see, what would you say? Politically correct. He was married. That's all I'll say about him. He was married. But he's one of those guys that if you turn your back on him, he'll lean into you. I think I can say that. Well, anyway, and he would say everything 3 times. He'll say, I got to get a tube. I got to get a tube. I got to get a tube. Okay? And it was really annoying. It was almost like if you ever watched the Hercules cartoon. All right, Herc. All right, Herc. That centaur. Was it a centaur? It was half man, half horse. And it would always repeat everything just like that 3 times. So he starts complaining that he needs a 8-track player for his son for Christmas. So we go down, and now he's supposed to be a technician. So I go over there, and they had these ones that look like suitcases. And they opened them up. When you open the suitcase up, there's a speaker on each side of the suitcase when it opens up. And you can pull them apart, and there's a wire that goes between them. And it's an 8-track player. That's all it is. There's no radio. So I show him, you plug it in. They let you plug the stuff in that doesn't work in RCA, in the store. You plug it in, and I showed him, you open the latch for the 8-track player. You go in there, you put your finger in, and you click this micro switch, and you hear the motor spinning, but the capstan's not spinning. And you hear the motor in both speakers equally. I said, this is a good unit. What has happened to this unit is the belt has come off. Now what happens is, if you stand these two speakers up, and it's playing a song, and you bump the one speaker hard, or it falls over, the belt, the flat belt on the capstan comes right off. And now you have to open the unit up and put the capstan belt back on. And it's not loose, it's tight, but it just catches it the right way and it walks itself up. So I buy the unit. He's like really like questioning me. It's $3 frickin' he has to pay for this thing. We go upstairs, I undo like 4 screws, I open it up, there's the belt off. I put the belt back on. Now he doesn't have an 8-track to test it with. So I'm going to run to my car at break time, and the boss says, you can't go to your car during break time. I said, why not? He says, well, they feel as though you're stealing, and then the other guy goes, tell them the real truth. Tell them the real truth. I said, what? What's going on? He says, well, the girls in the factory have been known to be hookers in the cars in the parking lot. And to stop that, they didn't allow anybody to leave the building until 4 o'clock, whatever we got off at, you know. So I said, all right. So I had to go over to my big boss and get a pass and go down and tell the guard. And normally the guard would walk with you to the parking lot, but he's like, no, I trust you. I said, I'll be right back. I got to go get some 8-tracks. So I get the 8-tracks, I bring them back. He's testing it out. He takes the thing home with my 8-tracks. He never returned them. And he took $30 worth of 8-tracks on me, okay? And that's the guy that would say everything 3 times. You want me to bring them back? You want me to bring them back? You want me to bring them back? That's how he was. Now let me put this on pause again. One of the other funny things that would happen that they told me about was this one guy kept propositioning one of the workers. And he got caught wearing a mirror on his shoe. And he'd walk around in the place. And they didn't fire him. The union worked out a deal with him. He walked around with a mirror on his toe of his shoe. And he would go up under the girl's skirts. Now, nowadays, you'd be crucified for that. And RCA would have been sued for a couple $1 million. So anyway, so they get him to stop wearing the mirror. But he keeps bothering this one girl about wanting to have sex with her. And then she said one day she actually gave him an amount, like $2,000. So we had a credit union. So one day he went to get a down payment for a car, and he went upstairs, one of the floors of the building. There was actually a RCA credit union. He went in there and he got $3,000 cash, and he came down and he showed it to the girl, and she didn't know what to do. I'm like, tell him to go, F himself, but she didn't. She was torn between taking the money and telling them to get lost. And they're telling me the story. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding. He goes, don't do any of that now, man. And all these guys that I used to talk to in RCA, they had almost 30 years there. And the one guy that said everything 3 times, said everything 3 times, said everything 3 times, we had his dinner. He invited me to his dinner for 25 or 30 years, whatever it was. And they brought out this cold surf and turf dinner. Does anybody here want that? No. So he sends it back. And he's sitting there and he decides to order the surf and turf. Well, we all get hot meals. He gets the same surf and turf again. And he's sitting there complaining. And nobody's even paying any attention to him because he wasn't saying everything 3 times. It was hilarious stuff that went on in that place. It was just constant bedlam. Let me pause it again. All right, here's another thing that would happen. RCA had this big banquet area that they put on dinners for the bosses and visiting companies that were buying the tubes. And they would put plays on. These are the stories I can't tell people around here. RCA did an Arbor Day play. And it's actually the song that I heard on the Little Rascals. Dun 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 dun. And then I think Alfalfa, I think I shall never see a girl as lovely as a tree or a poem as lovely as a tree. But I'm walking through RCA down to the cafeteria. Oh, and they also had chocolate covered grasshoppers there. and other weird things every once in a while in the cafeteria. Big cafeteria. And I'm walking through and I hear this piano playing this thing that I heard from the Little Rascals. I said, what's going on? He says, oh, the high school comes in and does plays for us and songs. At Christmas time, the kids come in and Christmas carol the cafeteria. So when you're sitting at Christmas time in the cafeteria, you got the high school singing Christmas carols to you because their uncles, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters all work in RCA. Okay? So we also put plays on the people, and they'd go over to the high school or wherever, maybe senior citizen hall, and they would do plays. But this is where I worked, and I did my job. And one of the wacky things happened was the guy would tell you, they would secretly tell you these things, and you weren't supposed to repeat it back then. And if you look up on the internet, 6GH8s, they're crap. They're total crap. Now, what RCA did was they took an entire building, 3 floors, and they designed this tube, 6GH8. And they used it in the IF strip. They used it for RF amp. They used it for the oscillator, AGC, whatever. They used like 6 to 8 of these things in the television set. Now, Joe Toron, the guy that sat next to me, his job, one of his jobs was whenever the light, you'd hear the light go on, a little bit of a ding noise. And that was telling you that one of the tubes, they would cycle on and off, and you had bay after bay of tubes. And there were 6GH8s, and upon heating up or cooling down, the heater to cathode short, and there was a voltage between the heater and cathode on all the tubes, on all the bays, and there were several lights, and Joe had the ability to run over there and find the tube that had the short. And he showed me the trick one day. What he does is he runs over there, and as it's heating up, the short goes away. But what he would do is he would pull the tube up and let it cool off a little bit and stick it back in, on and off as it was cooling down. And all of a sudden the light would come on. And he'd double check it, that tube was bad. And he'd pull that tube, and all the tubes were written on with China markers in red. And it was like a porcelain, the ink was like porcelain. Once it got hot, it got rock hard. You couldn't remove it from the tube without scratching it. And you would take the tube to the girl, and she'd look it up, and what run number, and then she'd give you another set of tubes. So if you had one tube fail out of 10, that gave you another set of 10 to put up. So that rack was loaded, and it was hot, and you had to go over there, and Joe could go over there, and he could find that tube that was heated or cathode. But he had an idea what, he had several lights that went on and off, what section of the rack system. And he showed me, he pulled each tube out one at a time, and then he'd push it in and out of the socket, and as it was heating back up, that short would appear, and then he would let the tube cool off, he'd go and do it again, and he would make sure he actually had the tube that failed. But I saw that, and I was like, so I mentioned that to him. He goes, well, there's a whole building that makes 6GH8s. And another guy, the guy that talks 3 times, that talks 3 times, that talks 3 times, he starts telling the story how the tubes are crap. And they put so many of them in television sets. And go read up on the 6GH8 RCA. But that's one of the things, when you work there, you didn't talk about it, because that was your bread and butter working there. But towards the end, these are old RCA logos. Towards the end, we were making real crap. There were some tubes that the cathode was gold-plated, or maybe the grid, and they took the gold out of the tubes, and that caused all kinds of problems. And we had this big cabinet, and when a TV radio repair shop got a brand new tube that was no good, they would write up a letter and send it back to us, and we were supposed to take those tubes and test them, and if they failed, send them a new one. Well, that cabinet was filling up. I told my boss, I said, we're going out of business. They'll wait forever. They're never going to get the tube. If they call the front of the building and complain, they'll just send them a new tube. I said, I'm not testing all those tubes. You're talking thousands of tubes. And at the end, when we were taking the gold out, the tubes were real crap. 6BK6, I think it was, high voltage regulator. They were running away in the TV set. And the glass was actually melting on them. 6BK6, sounds about right. It's a high voltage regulator. When the television scene goes dark, like in a Western, it's nighttime, that tube has to take the high voltage. And it shunts the high voltage, high voltage shunt regulator of some sort. and that tube would get so hot it would burst. And I had box after box of these things, and I had the tester, and I basically went to my father's caddy at home, and I brought one of the tubes in. He had a couple of them. I took it in and I put it in the tester. It tested perfect. And then I got talking to the engineer. He says, yeah, the guy took the gold out of the tube. He got a reward for doing that, and then he quit. He says, now I'm in charge of the tube, and I have to go to the meeting and tell them they better put the gold back in the tube, or they're going to be paying for people's television sets. But this is the hilarious stuff. And at the end, there was this one engineer. I can't remember his name. He had this big wagon wheel belt buckle, and he had 27 different tubes that he had to follow, and at the end it was like 75. And he'd come over and stand by me, and he goes, I just had to get out of there. And he would talk to me. He says, they think I'm going to be able to take care of 75 different tube types as a engineer. And I said, well, you know, I'm running more than that over here, tubes. And my boss, the dandy, I used to call him the dandy. The cheaper boss was above him, but the dandy wanted all the test beds to look like they were just made after World War II. And I was constantly cleaning them and polishing them. And the place closed down anyway. It didn't do any good. They shipped the tubes and pneumatrons to South America. And that's why I was put on the Trade Readjustment Act. That's another story for another time. I think that's it. All right, that's it.